All right, what's up, listeners? Welcome back to Predator versus Movies. I'm Alex.
I'm Peter.
I'm Aiden.
And I am Groot. This is a podcast where we discuss,
Nice.
and this is a podcast where we usually discuss and review the latest movie releases. But this week, we're actually going to be doing a throwback episode while we take some time off. So we're going to be discussing not the Guardians of the Galaxy film releasing this year, but the one that started it all from 2014, Guardians of the Galaxy, the OG. We're going to start off with our just kind of reviews of the film, and then we're going to go into a deeper discussion of the film, and then finally we're going to ask the most important question: would this movie be better if the alien from Predator was in it? So we have some movie information that Aiden is going to read as he.
It's so weird to do this so soon.
Right?
Yeah. So the movie was directed by James Gunn. It was written by James Gunn and Nicole Perlman. It stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper, Lee Pace, Michael Rooker, Karen Gillan, Jaimin Hansu. Sorry, I don't know. I didn't look up that name. John C. Reilly, Glenn Close, Benicio del Toro. I forgot to look it up. Shit.
You forgot to look it up.
DOP, Ben Davis. Music is by Tyler Bates. It was released August 1st, 2014. The runtime is 2 hours and 2 minutes. It had a budget of $232.3 million and a box office of $773.3 million.
Well done. That means it was profitable.
It made money.
And as we usually do, we have a game. It's called Predacritic, and basically there's a website called Metacritic where critics' scores of a movie are tabulated out of 100. If it gets 60 or above, it's green. If it's 80 or above, it's must see. If it's like 60 to 45, it's yellow. And if it's below that, it's red. We are going to guess where Guardians of the Galaxy lands in that metric. I am going first. I spun the wheel already.
Oh, yeah.
I think Guardians of the Galaxy is good. It's definitely not going to get the must see label. That's reserved for like the high arts. But I do think it's a very good film, so I think it will land nicely in the 70s. But I'm going to guess probably lower on that metric. Well, I'm going to split it. I'm going to go with 75. That's my guess.
You took my guess. I was going to go with 75.
Well,
I'm also right around there.
Next up is Aiden.
Yeah, so I'm definitely hovering in the same area. I agree with your reasoning. I like this movie, but it's not going to get like super, super high. I'm going to go 74.
Interesting. And Peter, where are you going to go?
Dude, you're not letting me play the game. Oh my god.
Yeah, I didn't give you the option. You have to choose. Yeah.
73.
This is great because it's either like.
Oh, you saved me. Let's
wait,
go.
what? What did you say?
You said
You're
73.
safe. No, you're safe either way, though. You know what I mean?
No.
Not if it's
I
high.
think-
If you guess 76 and it's 77, I lose.
Oh.
Yeah, either way,
But you can save
one
me.
of us is safe, but you saved Aiden instead of me. So you guess 73, 74, 75. Great. Okay, this one will take a second for me to find because I didn't have the website up. My bad. Oh man, that tricked me so bad. I looked it up, and the first one that came up was the video game, which did very well. Apparently, it got an 80. I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck?"
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with Metacritic. I also got spoiled for next week, so I will not be participating if I remember that. But it has a 76.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So I win. Hooray.
We're right around
But
there.
also like solid. No, I think that's a good score for this one. So as the winner, I get to give my reaction first. So this movie means a lot to me personally. We'll have a point about personal impact a bit later, but this movie like really changed my personality, I think, and was like really spoke to me. Someone recently asked me to do like a top 10 of my favorite films, and I think there's two different types of people, like the kind of responses they give when someone asks them that question. They might say what they think are the best films of all time, and then there are people who give their like comfort films, the ones that they like revisiting and the ones that make them feel the best. And I am actually, despite being like a self-described cinephile. I fall into the latter camp. I say my favorite movies are the ones that make me feel great, that I have like nostalgic connection to. So Guardians of the Galaxy actually did make it onto my top 10 favorite films list. Just kind of, yeah. So this film means a lot to me, and I've seen it a couple times, and yeah, I still love it. So I think the characters are super strong and very well written. I think this movie and then later franchise breathed new life into the MCU when even it didn't really need it, but it kind of did, and it made the MCU realize like it can be very different from what it had been. It was kind of, a lot of it was in the same vein of very serious, and I think it tried something new, which was great. It's like I know that James Gunn was inspired by Star Wars, which I also have a personal connection with, but like it's cool that now I have another kind of like space franchise that I like. I just like space stuff is cool to me. Yeah, the comedy's super funny, and like I don't think it's a perfect film. I see the flaws sometimes, but I think it's just like a really great ride to sit through. And I love it despite its flaws, and that's kind of part of the message of the movie, which I also think is really interesting. So, yeah, I could talk about this movie forever, but I wonder what I gave it. I don't know what my star rating is. I have to check actually on Letterboxd. I gave it a 4, but I don't know. I could give it a 4.5 or a 5. Like I love this movie, and of course I would recommend this. So, next up is Aiden. What did you think about this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I also like this movie a lot. I liked it when I first saw it. I don't have as strong of a connection to it as you do, I think. But yeah, this is a movie that upon rewatch, I was surprised at like I've seen this movie multiple times, and a lot of it, like I know exactly what's gonna happen. I know exactly what joke is going to be told, and I was still like laughing out loud. And so that's a pretty good mark for for the comedy at least. Yeah, so for the most part, I think the comedy is quite funny. There's some parts of it that I don't like, particularly in the beginning. There's a really specific thing they do a bunch of times in the beginning and then don't do for the rest of the movie, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't know why, whatever. But I'll get into that. I think that this movie is a lot more fresh than a lot of movies, although I will say that I think that there's nothing super unique about like shot composition and stuff like that. If I want to get like nitpicky, like this is like a perfectly good looking movie, but I just don't think it does kind of just look average to me. It looks like an average sort of blockbuster. I also think that there are like, the characters are super, super strong. There are certain, I just wish that characters, some of the traits were shown in slightly different ways. And then there are just like little things. It's mostly, my general views are, I really like this movie. They're just things that I would nitpick, but this is a really fun time. I would give this 4 stars, and I would recommend it to people.
Nice. Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm like reciting line for line like what they're saying at the same time sometimes. Like obviously not the whole movie, but certain punchlines I'm saying it at the same time, the same intonation, the same like voice, because it's just like they're just so iconic at this point. Peter, what did you think about this movie?
Okay, so I loved this film when it first released. It's probably like, this is phase 1 MCU or is this phase 2?
Phase 2.
I'm not sure. Phase 2.
Man, I'm a huge nerd about this. Like I know that answer easy, bro. Like sorry.
But honestly, like second watch, I didn't enjoy it as much as the first time, to be honest. And Aiden, I actually disagree with you there. I went to shot composition. I actually noticed some really creative shots and just really pretty visuals. I don't think like if we judge like the CGI of the film, it might not be as as flashy as some of the more big epics like, you know, Infinity War or Endgame. But then there are some really creative, like you can tell these are non-CGI shots that I thought are really cool. Whether it's like Star-Lord fighting in the steamy ancient ruined planet at the beginning, or them boarding Ronan's ship, you know, like there's just one shot that I remember pretty clearly, that you see this futuristic door sort of like turn and open, and the camera's behind the door. I thought that was really cool. And then like them walking through like the hole they blow at the side of Ronan's ship as they walk out of the ship. I thought that was really cool as well. So like visually, I think it's a really pretty film. But the characters, man, I gotta say the game might have ruined the movie for me. So I played the Guardians game very recently, and I got to spend a lot more time with the Guardians characters. And because it's a video game, you can only like facial expression don't matter as much, but like the voice acting matters a lot. So like it's just a much louder version of the Guardians characteristics that we're seeing in the movie. And I think that somehow ruined the movie for me because the movie is just a quieter version of that. Like Drax is more, more like straight face, not laughing at anything, and then throwing out some really stupid jokes. And then like Rock is much louder than Bradley Cooper in this one. And Groot is just, I'm Grooting, but with a lot more characteristic because Rock is always there to translate. So that, honestly, the game might have ruined the movie for me. But, the emotional punch is still there when Groot died. And like I said, like I really like how James Gunn brought the character together in such a natural way to form that team. So like the plot progression, I also really enjoy. But the characters themselves got ruined for me, unfortunately. So honestly, I would probably give it a 4-star on my first watch, but this one, because I've played the game now, it's a 3.5 for me. But I would absolutely recommend this movie. It's still a really brilliant film.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I have also played the video game, and I like, if anything, like the reverse reaction, I'd say that the game I was just kind of like comparing to the Guardians that I know and love, and so I think when they were making the game, they knew that problem, and so they try to make their characters different, and I just found those characterizations just kind of like, it wasn't the canon that I preferred, and so like the changes they made, I was like, oh, that's not my Star-Lord, like that sort of thing, and yeah, so it's interesting that you feel that way, but. Anyways, now that we've got that out of the way, we're going to do our 2-minute synopsis so that if you haven't seen the film, you are filled in. Okay. Peter, because you did lose the
spoilers.
Game.
Oh, yeah, spoilers.
Yeah, we kind of did a big spoiler in Peter's review, but maybe we'll change that for next time. I think we should do non-spoiler reactions.
Non-spoiler?
Anyways,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, for next time.
Yeah, so no Guardians 2 spoilers, right? This is just Guardians 1. I can't talk about Guardians 2 still.
Why would you talk about Guardians 2?
No, because I was thinking about the backstory, because like the scene at the beginning,
okay,
I was like...
stick it to
okay,
one...
pew pew, Guardians 2 spoilers. Pew pew pew.
Right. Like, try and
No,
keep
I don't think we're... Yeah.
Keep it to the movie we're talking about. Anyways, Peter,
but I mean,
ready?
if you want to bring up like ego, I guess, then like maybe, but yeah.
Oh,
sure.
Whoa. Okay, I won't bring it up. I'll keep it Guardians.
Okay. Especially not in the synopsis, but anyways, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
So we first met Peter when he was a kid, and his mom is dying of cancer. And then he was really sad, when his mom passed away. So he ran out of the hospital, and then that's where Yondu found him and picked him up. So quick time jump to the future, where Peter's on Morag and trying to steal an ancient orb that he's going to sell. But at the same time, he's also double-crossing Yondu because Yondu's the one that set up the deal. So on the planet, he met up with a bunch of Ronan's goons, and then they fought. And then we got introduced to Ronan, who's a Kree accuser that is going after Nova Corps and Xandar because they killed his family. And then we later on introduced to Ronan's boss, which is Thanos. Thanos is hiring Ronan to sort of do this for him so he can get hold of an Infinity Stone. So at the same time, when Peter is trying to sell the stone to a Xandarian merchant, Yondu's placed a bounty on him. So Rock and Groot got involved because they're bounty hunters, and Gamora's also involved because Gamora's working for Yondu. No, sorry, not Yondu, Ronan, to get the orb for him. So they crossed paths in Xandar, and then they fought. And then they all got sent to the Kiln, which is a high-security prison. And then they planned a prison escape, and that's where they also found Drax. So they all escaped together. And then they went to nowhere to sell the orb to the collector. But then Ronan's troops attacked and Ravengers got involved. And then eventually we all go to Xandar with a huge like dogfight between Nova, Ravagers, and Ronan's guys. And then eventually the whole battle ends up with a dance-off between Ronan and the Guardians. And Peter used the Infinity Stone to kill Ronan. End of the story. The orb is now under Nova Corp, and Peter and the crew is onto new adventures.
Okay, that's time up. That was a really interesting summary.
Did I miss anything?
You spent the first like minute and 15s just on the first act.
15 minutes was most of
When I
your
saw the
summary.
40-second countdown, I was like, oh shit, I'm not like halfway through the movie.
Yeah, no, it's because like you focused on like everybody's relation to each other. It sounded more like I was thinking like that's what like how I would describe The Godfather or something. Like, oh, and he's this guy's brother, and then they're working for this guy, and it's like more about the organization of the thing. Anyways, like I think you like mostly got it. Like
That's pretty much it.
Really like the ending is that the Guardians kill Ronan together. They have to share the power of the Infinity Stone to kill him. But I mean, I think as far as summaries go, that will suffice. So I think we just move on to our spoilery discussion. So first question I'm going to ask you guys is, what was your favorite part?
I have
well, for me,
easy answer for this one.
okay, I don't have an easy answer. I don't have an easy answer, so you go.
Okay. I really loved the first time we visited Xandar. I just love how James Gunn's able to sort of piece together different plot threads together. So we've already been following Peter on his journey to sell the stone. So, you know, it's natural that we're going to Xandar. And then at the same time, because the bounty that was placed on him by Yondu, which we got introduced to earlier, we see Rocket and Groot getting involved with like the bounty amount, 40,000 credits, whatever. And then Gamora's literally standing there as he's walking out the store. So I just love how he's able to piece together these plot threads seamlessly. It's not like he needs like exposition or characters. Oh, have you heard about that guy? He's also here. You know, it's very natural. And then the way that he's able to sort of send them all to the same location for more character development inside the film is also very clever. So I think that entire sequence is one of my favorites on the film.
I really like that sequence as well. I think like Rocket's introduction is so funny, where he's just criticizing people, and it's like right away you get his character is that he's like analyzing everybody, and he's just like super negative. But it's really funny, like as an intro, like he's talking about like Stanley, like, oh, what a pervert, and look at this, like a child, oh, he looks so full of himself. And meanwhile, like Groot is drinking the fountain
Drinking
water.
from a fountain.
And it's great. It's a great sequence. I have a few favorite moments, so I'll unless Aiden thinks of one, I'll start.
Yeah,
scattering mine around.
Like I guess one of my favorites. I really love. I really love the speech when. Like when they decide like we're going to do this and we're going to try to stop Ronan. I think that's like my favorite moment of the movie when he says, like, I specifically remember a line where he's like, and I'd remember this for years, where it's like, we have a chance, and it's like a chance to do what? To give a shit. Like that's a great line. That's a great line. And so I also like that this movie does a good job of doing like a little bit of like self-referential comedy, but in a way that isn't like, oh my god, like holy fuck.
Yeah.
And like that scene is a good example of this, where it's like when Rocket stands, he's like, oh yeah, we're just like 5 idiots standing. Like that's like a funny thing, because like a character would remark on that, like instead of it being like his character would remark on that. So it's not and not everyone would. Like Gamora wouldn't remark on that. Like, and so that's an important thing. So I think I love that moment.
I think you're touching on a big thing, which is that characters have distinct voices, and that is something that I do want to get into later. But that was one of the 3 moments for me, is that loser speech. I call it the loser speech because it's when early in the speech, Peter says, or no, it's not early, whatever. He says, you know what I see when I look around this circle? A bunch of losers. Pause. and by that I mean folks who have lost stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I it speaks to the core theme of found family, but it is a really like it's a rousing and touching scene while also being, like you said, very funny. The whole 12% of a plan. Groot is like, at least it's not 11%, and then he's like, yeah, thanks, Groot gets it, and then Groot's like eating a leaf off of his shoulder. Like,
I also love
Yep.
Dave Bautista's delivery on the. Oh, I must have missed that. I was thinking about something else. It's so funny.
I love that. Yeah, so that's a fantastic scene. Oh, right, and I think my favorite part of that is I actually had to write it down because I love this delivery so much, is when Star-Lord is criticizing Rocket for his attempt to save them from the Ravagers, and he's like, How are you saving me if you're gonna blow up the ship that I'm on? And he's like, we're gonna figure it out. And it's like, you only gave them 5 seconds too. Like, that's not enough time for them to hand us over. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't think about the minutia of the plan.
Yeah, that is a line that the exact intonation was ingrained in my head. Yeah.
Yes, it's minutia. So that's a great part. My other two favorite parts. One we talked about last week. Actually, sorry. Before we get into that. This loser speech, they try to do the exact same thing in Dungeons and Dragons, which is a movie we reviewed for us last week, but for listeners a month ago, I guess.
Yeah.
And does not even hit close to the same heights.
I don't even remember it. Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so in Dungeons and Dragons, Chris Pine, they're on the beach.
He's on the beach, yeah.
We're failures. They just changed the word. It's like, you don't want to see we're a bunch of failures, or something like that. But it's funny that we're doing this right after we did Dungeons and Dragons, because that was a film that I was calling a Guardians knockoff, and maybe you can kind of see all the similarities. But anyways, so speaking of that, last week when we did Dungeons and Dragons, I mentioned this scene, but it's in the prison escape, the triangle composition. As I call it that because it's from a YouTube analysis video I've seen, but it's when Rocket is describing the plan to escape, and that they need this battery. And then as he's describing the importance of the battery, and as he's winding down the importance of getting it last because it'll kick things into high gear, meanwhile Groot is in the background of the shot getting the battery immediately. Great moment. Just it's everything all together. Like, the directing is really strong. It's a great moment.
Yeah, and I think again, to compare to the same gag in Dungeons and Dragons, it's the shot composition sells it so hard. Also, very important, very, very important thing, we get a rack focus insert of the battery early on. He says, you see that, and we see it. And we don't know, in Dungeons and Dragons, we don't know that the guy walking up to that specific part of the bridge is going to trigger the bridge thing. Whereas we know immediately, oh, that's the battery thing, and Groot is going towards it. So it's way better executed here.
And you know what it is? It's setup and payoff. So you have to set up the joke early enough to allow for the payoff to happen.
Yeah,
exactly, and it's dramatic tension because we see something that the characters do not, and we have knowledge that makes it there's tension involved. You're going, Groot, don't do that. Meanwhile, in the bridge scene that we're talking about from Dungeons and Dragons, we don't know that yet, and so we're not understanding what is happening as it's happening, so it doesn't work. The other scene that I pulled out is not the funniest scene, but it's one that I like for a multitude of reasons. It's I called it the fooled around and fell in love scene because that's the song that's playing in the background. It's when Gamora and Star-Lord are having their first kind of close moment on Nowhere. I just love they're out on this balcony and it's the galaxy in front of them, so it looks really nice, at least to me. I don't know what you think, Aiden, but and as far as a romantic scene, it's really good. It's fun and kind of like a little bit quirky, like the Guardians franchise is. they throw in their Kevin Bacon reference, which is paid off later, which I really liked. Yeah, and it is like it's just like a really nice romantic scene, which I feel like has kind of evaporated from the MCU. I know there's a lot of talk recently about like how movies are sexless, and I wouldn't say that Guardians is a sexy movie. I think it's also kind of lacking in that regard. It is a family-friendly movie, but I do think this is a movie with a hint of romance, which even that is kind of gone from the MCU.
It's a movie that's not afraid to dedicate an entire scene to just that, because that's really
Yeah.
that's the only thing that's important of that scene. Like that was a moment when on my rewatch I was like, okay, like because I've seen the movie a bunch of times, so I'm thinking like, okay, so as a writer, like why do you put in that the collector isn't just immediately ready for them? Why would you make it so that the collector is making them wait? And it's just so that they can have those character moments. And that's really great. Like between that and the bar, I have a slight problem with. No, never mind. I have a comment on one of the things that happens in the bar, but yeah, no, I agree, and I agree that shot looks pretty nice. Again, there's just something about like, there's a certain like veneer this movie has that is just not. It just doesn't look like stand out to me. Like just nothing in this movie just looks that way to me, and like. It's not that it's bad, like it looks good, but yeah. So, but I agree that that's a nice looking part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was looking at my document of shots I've pulled from movies, and I was trying to be like, yeah, isn't the shot composition great? But looking at it, like, it's just so dark. I don't know if it's just my screen, but I do think it is kind of like, it's better than most MCU movies, but it is not like, I don't know, like Top Gun,
Yeah.
or even Avatar. I think probably Avatar does a better job. Like those are ones that you would like frame or something. I don't think Guardians was ever intending to do that, but I think that James Gunn put in a lot of thought into the shot composition.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
And I think for what it is, action comedy space blockbuster, I think it's shot quite well.
Well, exactly, like the point we gave, like the Groot taking the battery gag, that's shot great. Like that's like the perfect shot to do that gag in. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about while we're here. Remember, it's a point that I call remember when the MCU made movies. This feels like it was directed by a person.
Yes.
like someone was like, I have a story to tell, and boy, am I going to tell it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I had the exact same feeling where I was like, man, like even like the little things that don't work for me, like this has so much heart. Like this is just clearly like there's so much like of just care. Like clearly everyone cares about what they're doing, and it's not AI generated in the same way that Ant-Man was. Like that, like oh my god. The whiplash of like Ant-Man being the most recent MCU movie I saw to this, like that's insane. But yeah, like because even I guess I won't keep postponing it. One of my little problems with this movie is that, like, a lot of the big character reveals are just, like, we're with them, and then they just kind of hit a point where they just say something really traumatic that happened to them, and they just, like, tell another character. Like, Rocket does that, where... Yeah. And I actually really love the deliveries. Bradley Cooper is really good. And, like, good. The delivery's great, and the line is great of, I didn't ask to be... like picked apart and put back together and pulled apart and put back together again. That's a great line because it gives you information as to what happened to him without actually explicitly saying what happened to him. Mm-hmm. But I just think every character in general has the problem of like, they kind of just say like, yeah, well, when my mom was killed by the thieves and then I had to do this. No, obviously that's not a real thing, but like, yeah. But my point is, regardless of that, at least it's like, I buy everything they're saying, and everything they're saying affects their actions. So it's like there's at least like something there. Like it's like a character that I can latch onto and really love.
Yeah. Well, no, I think. Oh, sorry. Yes, go Peter. Yeah.
Well, I think like the entire success of the Guardians rely on the characters. Like Guardians of the Galaxies are the characters. Aiden has to go.
It's peacing out. Don't worry,
Um,
Aiden, for the pod.
but honestly, like Alex, like you said, like one of the things that this movie does so well, it's the consistency of the characters. Like all of the things that they do are consistent with their values and characteristics, and are believable because of that. So the fact that James Gunn is able to craft an entire movie where characters do that all the time, and there's like not one moment that's immersion breaking when it comes to the characters, and what they do is quite fantastic. So
Yeah, I I think you're right that the Guardians franchise, like why it works, is the characters, and that each character is super distinct, and like not just in like the way they talk, but they all fall into like pretty classic archetypes, and I think it just really works here. So like, Gamora is the kind of like badass female warrior. Drax is the muscle who doesn't understand metaphors. Rocket is the kind of like mechanic. I can fix things. I can make weapons kind of guy. Groot is, I guess, also the muscle, but I think he and Drax fill like different niches. Like he's the muscle that doesn't talk, and then uh, Star Lord is like the charismatic leader who is pretty stupid sometimes,
and
but
not great at anything. Yeah.
no. But actually, here's a point that I can bring up is what I love so much about Star Lord, and why basically the same character didn't work for me in Chris Pine in Dungeons and Dragons, is that Star Lord, although they are both leaders who make plans that don't always work or are kind of stupid characters, like Star Lord has so much heart to him, and like it leads him astray, and he makes really bad choices sometimes. So he's kind of got like two distinct character flaws that I tracked. One is that he's initially very selfish, and kind of like I just kept saying, like, man, he's a piece of shit sometimes. Like when he is escaping Morag and he forgets that there's a girl in his ship who's just like been rattled around. She's like, what the fuck's happening? And he's like, I forgot you were here. He's just like a womanizer kind of character. And he's always like thinking about the credits first. There's a great point later when they realize the orb is an Infinity Stone, and he's like, I don't know, can we find a guy who's really nice and make a lot of money and not do either of the difficult choices? So I love that about him. And then also he's reckless when someone like when something gets him like at his heart, he can make some like pretty stupid choices. So like when the prison guard takes his whatever the music thing is, Walkman, he reacts impulsively, and because that like hits at his core. I hate using this word trauma, but like that's something that really matters to him, and so he makes a really impulsive decision to attack the guy, even though he gets hurt in return. Like there's a retaliation, obviously, and he goes back to save it later.
Even though these actions are very stupid, but these are actions that you can relate to. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
It's first of all, it's all very consistent, like you said. Like at first he only cares about credit, he's selfish, and then later on we sort of go back to that point when they're in nowhere. It's like, hey, even though it's an Infinity Stone, that's still solid, but just to a very, very nice guy. So I think all of these combined just make Star-Lord a very charming, but also like a character that you won't take that seriously of, at the same time. But then obviously like in Guardians 2 we explore his backstory a lot more, where there's still like a rich emotional history that he has that we can explore and sort of relate to at the same time.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something I really like as well about the way that his character is introduced is that I like that when we see him as a kid, he says like he talks about how he got into a fight with these other kids because they were hurting a frog who didn't do anything wrong. And then like the first thing we see with him as an adult is him kicking these little animals that are hopping around, which is both funny because it's just like a funny, goofy introduction, but then it also is a good character moment because it shows how much he's changed. Like
Dude,
this
I
kid, like
didn't even
clearly in the
notice.
past like 20 years, a bunch of stuff has happened, and he is like buried that kid that beat up the guys who hurt the frog. He's buried that, and he's something, and it like sets up really well. Like this movie is gonna be about him like relearning how to like let the best parts of himself out.
That's a good
Yeah.
catch, Aiden.
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's a really important like save the cat moment, right? Like you need that thing that makes you care about the characters. I think that even if that one line hadn't been there, I'm sure you would still connect with Star-Lord because he lost his mom. Tragedy is a one way to connect with a character. It's not always, you don't always have to save an animal. It works very well instinctually for us humans, but tragedy and being good at a skill apparently is one. Like we are often taken by characters who are skilled at a particular thing, but I do think it gives so much because this is a piece of shit character that when he's young, he's looking out for the small guy. He's looking out for the frog that they smushed with a stick. And so I do think that is a really important moment. But yeah, I do want to touch upon the point that you brought up earlier. We kind of got sidetracked, but the exposition brain or exposition speak, I do think that is one of the problems with this movie.
There's a particular moment where Ronan says something like, Thanos has lent me you guys, and in exchange he will destroy the planet. And it's like just a completely unnecessary line, because from both the stuff we get immediately before and immediately after, that is very clear that that's what the situation is. Like, and even if like, it's very clear. It's, to me, it's what seems to have happened is I feel like that's like an audience tested line. Like they played it and like the audience wasn't sure that that they got that Thanos was going to destroy the planet for him, and so they like made sure to put that line in there, because the rest of the script doesn't feel like it's written with that line in mind. It feels like it's written as if that line didn't happen.
Yeah, this movie I think is it's a movie that kind of treats its audience like they're idiots, because I mean it's a Marvel blockbuster, and I think they're kind of right. like I think a lot of the people watching this movie are either like going to be a little slow on the uptake, or at the very least maybe not fully paying attention.
I don't think it's that they're dumb. I think it's, sorry to cut you off, I think it's just that like they're going to a movie just to like, it's just for the ride.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a roller coaster. It's like Martin Scorsese says. It's a roller coaster more than cinema. And so sometimes for those kinds of like, it's a different movie experience. You need those reminders just to like you guys you're following, right? And I think it's a lot to introduce for one movie. It's introducing a whole world where the MCU usually doesn't have to, because there's a lot of assumptions that you already know this world. It's our world with some new things, new characters. But now we're introducing planets, people, and like there's a lot going on in this movie. And so it's kind of impressive that so much works. But kind of like to your point, there are very obvious scenes where it's like, okay, this is like an audience thing. Like, hey guys, you following? Or like speaking to the audience. Probably the most egregious thing is the like hear your characters moment, the lineup, where they're just listing all the characters. Like, see, I know.
I think that one's way better. That one's way better in my opinion. Because at least it's like
they make it a
scene,
thing.
The scene like makes sense. Like it feels like validated by the scene that they would do that.
Yeah. I think like they do a really good job for most of the movie burying the exposition. Because whether you have a problem with it or not, exposition's ultimately necessary. So I think the way they do it is a very creative scene that is featured in the trailers. It works very well, and it really gets you like on board with the characters. I think it's just not subtle at all. Right. And so this time I noticed, I was like, oh, that's what this is, right? Very obviously, this is like catching up everyone to speed. Like, okay, here's this. Felt a little like on the nose this time for me. You know, I've
Yeah.
seen this movie a couple times now, but yeah,
I will say, like, to your point about like the amount of things going on in this movie, I agree that it does a really good job. But I think that one of the other problems this movie has is also like being saddled with like having to set up other MCU things. Like I always think about the Netflix Daredevil season 2 is the worst season of that show, and a big part of the reason is because it was forced to set up like the Hand and all these things that would become the main villains for the Defenders series. And I think Thanos doesn't need to be in this movie. Like I really don't think so. Like he's only there to like set up, like have them mention him like once. You know what I mean? Like I don't really like the scene between Thanos and Ronan. I really like don't feel it. Like I guess it does like stoke, like it escalates the conflict between them in that like it helps you buy that like Ronan's turning on him later. But like those are all the parts where they're talking about like Thanos this, Thanos that, are the parts where I'm like, okay, like come on, like we don't need this.
Honestly, I disagree, Aiden. I think you're like the whole point of this movie, like other than introducing the Guardians and everything, it's MCU's first dive into the concept of MCU is bigger than what's happening on Earth, and it's actually a cosmic universe where things are happening. I think it's very cool that you're seeing a character set up in post-credit scenes actually taken in the main stage as part of the main film and is related to the major villain of the film. I think it's actually a very interesting way to sort of connect this to the grander MCU universe without, because Thanos was barely featured, to be honest. Like, so I don't think it's a huge issue for me personally.
No, I don't think it's a huge issue either. I just think this movie is stronger if they cut Thanos and they just get a villain that is more like a villain that serves more of a purpose than just like this guy needs to exist to introduce us to the guy that we're going to need to know later.
Interesting. Yeah, I do think that Thanos is kind of like is part of the weaker parts of this movie. This is definitely a movie that is what I was thinking is like, okay, we're doing Infinity War. That's kind of like, this is the first movie that you really feel it. You could argue that Thor: The Dark World featuring the Aether might be the first one, or I doubt you would say that with Avengers 1, but I'd say this is really where the like the plan is clear and we're setting up the Infinity Stones. They're saying Infinity Stones in the movie. Thanos is in the movie, right? So it is starting to feel like, okay, we're leading to something. I think Thanos should be in this movie. I'm not sure that they handled it as well as they could have, only because that there is the connection to Gamora that is just like she talks about him. There's no scenes with Thanos and Gamora.
I guess that would be better for me. That would be a more interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would worry about adding scenes, because something that I wrote down while I was watching is like, this is a tight 2-hour film. Like usually you hear like tight 90, and I think there's too much in this movie, but it is like it's 2 hours, and I feel like they don't waste time pretty well anywhere. Like it's a comedy, so there's gags and stuff like that, and there's plenty of that, but the story is like very streamlined, I think.
I agree.
I think that the Thanos problem, though, kind of speaks to what is probably like the weakest part of this movie, which is Ronan. I have lots to say about that, but I'd like to hear from you guys first. Maybe let's start with Peter, actually.
Sure. Before we get into that, though, I just want to bring up one thing. I think,
okay.
the 2-hour runtime, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that is probably the reason why we only got teases of the character's backstory, and then we're sort of getting taken to a deeper dive when we got to Guardians 2, or in the other movies that features the Guardians.
It's also just how sequels work. You don't bring everything out in the first movie, because then you have nowhere to go.
And it, to my point about like the way they handled some character backstory, when I said the thing about like, oh, the character just like says like, this happened to me, I'm not saying that we should dive. I'm not saying we should dive deeper than that. I'm just saying like there's a different way you can have it than just character in a quiet moment or in a moment where we have a little break is like, this is me. Yeah.
It's very like,
I agree
you know,
with that. Yeah.
this one
Yeah.
time my family died, you know?
Yeah,
It's kind of
yeah.
like, it's apropos of nothing, you know?
Yeah.
They just
I
kind of,
think-
it seems like they just bring it up.
I
Right.
had a real trouble relating with Drax in this movie because he basically, like, I know his backstory by now pretty clearly. I know exactly what happened, but then literally it just in the middle of them trying to kill Gamora, Drax is like, they killed my Ronan killed my wife, Ronan killed my daughter, and then there's like zero follow up to all the action followed that we're supposed to be convinced by his exposition that we need to fill for him, like. I think words don't connect me with the character that efficiently, in my opinion.
I agree with you, but I actually think that that's an example of like one of the most valid moments of it in the movie. I believe Drax would constantly be monologuing and be like, Ronan and Thanos are the ones who slaughtered my family. I believe the character would do that. And also, like, I believe he would say that specifically in the scene where they're about to kill Gamora. Like, it makes sense that he's coming in and being like, no, she's mine.
It's very Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the six-figured man. You killed my father, prepared to die. Like, you know, like how he just constantly brings that up. But yeah, anyways, I forget what I was going to respond to. Peter on Ronan. I did ask you a question. Ronan,
yes.
What are your thoughts? Does he work? What's the problem?
Yo, Ronan's so stupid, man. Like I just feel like Ronan's a character like it's similar to Drax, to be honest. Like I can't relate to him. Like he said, "Oh, Xandarian people killed my family." It's like, okay, so like I'm just supposed to feel for you. Like I think the best type of villains are the villains that you actually like you believe in their cause. Like it makes sense for you to do this, but then of course because of circumstance they're not doing this in the best way, whatever. Like we're obviously still rooting for our heroes, but these are the villains that I like the most, the villains that you can relate to, the villains that you can see where they're coming from. But Ronan is obviously not that type of villain. There's just way too little that's said about him. He's just another generic bad guy, you know what I mean? And you just sort of see, like, you can see how his arc is gonna end when we first got introduced to him. So not a fan of Ronan.
Yeah. I will say I agree that I'm also not a fan of Ronan, but I do have a point. I hear people say that a lot where they're like, oh, like the best villains are the ones that where like in a sense like they're kind of like the good guy, but it's like you could kind of side with them maybe. And I don't think that's strictly true. I think that the best villain, like think about like the Dark Knight, like you don't care about what the Joker's doing in that movie. You're not like, I can get behind the Joker.
Or Darth Vader.
Right. And I think that what bothers me the most about Ronan is that what he is doing and him and his character has nothing to do with the thematic elements that are driving this movie. So if it tied in some way, like Peter Quill specifically needs to overcome the dejection and the pain that he's like learned and accrued over the years to like return to the point where he used to care about people and to find a family. If Ronan tied into that in some way, like if Ronan was like the inverse of Peter in some way, or if like I don't know, I don't have like a specific idea of how you do this, but like if you made the villain like representative of like not solving it, and so like if the villain represents selfishness, for example, then when Peter defeats him, he defeats selfishness. So there's stuff like that. Like I just think like there needs to be some sort of thematic tie-in, and that's why I think he's a weak villain.
Aiden, I agree with you, and I think you brought up a really good point. I think the best villains are not only the ones that you can relate to. That's I guess one category, but there's like a whole different category where they challenge our heroes in some way, whether it's being a reflection of the hero, like you said, like opposite thematically, or just like I think to a point like the Dark Knight, the Joker is more of like challenging the hero's ideology, like is Batman like really, you know, like the hero that the Gotham think he is, etc. Oh, I guess that's more Two-Face, but I agree with you that Ronan does not do any of these in this movie.
Yeah, well,
okay.
like, sorry, just to respond to the Joker thing really
Sure.
quick. Yeah, because like the Joker, like he's like the antithesis to Batman, where it's like, it like the Batman needs. It's like the soul of man is at stake between Batman and the Joker in the movie, because it's like Batman believes like people are good, they need to be saved, they'll do the right thing.
Oh yes,
Joker's
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
Joker's like everything is chaos. Like if you, a man will. Like, yeah. Were you gonna say, Alex?
Yeah. I think Ronan. I'm trying to reckon with what he is like on the page, like what the character he is over what he could have been. So what we do know about Ronan is that his father and his grandfather were killed by the Xandarians. So there is that kind of like generational trauma. I hate using that word, but like I think there's something there. So maybe that's, I almost wonder if he's a better antithesis of Drax. This is what I was just kind of occurred to me, and maybe that's why they keep facing off in this movie. Why Drax really wants to kill this guy is because like they're like opposites. Like at the midpoint they fight and then they meet again to fight later on. And that's because both of them had like the people they cared about were taken away, and they're strong, and I don't know, like it's like I said, this is kind of half baked, but I think they were trying to do something with that. Like his reasoning is revenge based and speaks to kind of like, he doesn't mention his childhood, but it's his parents, right? His parents were taken away from him, just like Peter's parents were taken away from him, Gamora's parents. Drax is kind of the one who didn't have that same thing, but Rocket's parents were taken too. Like, so there's something sort of there. I don't think they really try to make that anything. They definitely like don't try to make like his point of view one that you can understand, because like at the end of the day, he's a space Nazi is what I keep saying. Like he wants to wipe out a race of people, and you don't really want to like sympathize with that. Makes people uncomfortable. So it's like for a blockbuster, you know.
But it's not, you don't need to sympathize with him. You just need to like get what, like the leap between my family got killed, and because there's more going on there where it is like these people have been warring and he believes that that's the way things should be, and so he's like, I don't accept peace treaty. But like, yeah, I think that you can just do things to make that, to just get why he's doing it more. Yeah, he's a villain that just kind of exists to like be something that the heroes stop, instead of like being kind of a character in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to, like, we got introduced to Ronan when he is already on the road to destruction and chaos. Like, we didn't see the Ronan before and how he got there. I think that's what we're missing to really truly relate, or like not even relate, to just like, oh, like that is why he's doing this, or like, oh, that is like why how he's fitting into this movie thematically. But we're the first time we met him, he's already like, I want to destroy the Xandarian people. He killed a diplomat, and then he wants to wipe out the entire race. So we were missing that sort of like the beginning portion of his journey.
I think that also ties into how like Darth Vader is one of the most iconic villains of all time. Again, lots of parallels between those, Ronan and Darth Vader. And I think maybe some of why that works and this one doesn't is that, you know, Obi-Wan remembers before he was Darth. I'm a little hazy on like trying to remember what is canon.
Obi-Wan says like we fought together in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, okay.
Obi-Wan says that in New Hope, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be like, okay, what happens only in that first movie? But
it's also like, we don't know that it's Luke's father in that one. We know that there's some connection between Darth Vader and Luke in that movie, right? Like they say.
No, like, because I know this. Lucas didn't know that Luke was going to be his son until he was writing the second one. Yeah, so that's not. It's, at the time of writing A New Hope, that's quote unquote not canon, but I think still it's more to the point of that movie, right? Like it's an analogy of the Vietnam War, and Darth Vader's like the president of the United States. Like that's relevant to the story, whereas Ronan seems kind of like to the side of where the story is, which is found family. He's the catalyst for which the family is formed, but doesn't really inform the themes of the story, which is kind of the problem we seem to be having with Ronan. And I think most people list him under the forgettable, like, one movie villains that were just kind of like all blend together.
He's not as bad as whatever the dark elf guy is from.
Oh, Malekith. Malekith is one of the worst.
That's the worst one. Oh,
I also think
one of the worst.
I think also Yellow Jacket before he was MODOK.
But at the very least, like
one.
Yellow Jacket, like we were talking about it in our Ant-Man review, like where like Yellow Jacket is kind of like the opposite of Hope in some ways, and like
that is true.
And we have that. There's
true.
that prodigy mentor mentee like connection there, like of he's that gone wrong, like so there. I think there's even more there actually.
I think his connection is definitely better to the main characters, but I do think as a villain he's worse. Because what I like so much about Ronan is that, first of all, Lee Pace's performance is, I think, incredible. And
I agree.
Seeing him and like not really knowing who he is until this year, watching Bodies, and then seeing this like Chad guy, I was like, what the fuck? That was Ronan?
You never saw like Lord of the Rings?
Wait, he was in Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, he's in
one of the elves.
I've seen Lord of the Rings, but those movies are...
That is crazy.
Those movies are a fever dream. I saw those way too long ago. So, but I think his performance is great, and also what I think works about Ronan, where some of the other MCU ones maybe don't, is that I think he's like a formidable opponent, which is one of the really important things about a villain is that it seems like it's impossible to stop him.
Yeah,
true. I think
and they have to do something that is like glimpsing death to stop him.
Yeah, and I think that people don't give him enough credit for being that. Like, for all that he is, people, they say he's the worst villain, or like he's the reason why this movie doesn't work. And while that's true, I think they're not cutting him enough slack, the villain, because at the midpoint he shows up and Drax tries to stop him. Drax, who seems like this unbeatable guy, and like Ronan like creams him, like he's so good. And then he gets an Infinity Stone, and it's like, well, how are you supposed to stop that? We know how powerful that is. Now he's unstoppable. And they try to stop his ship from reaching the surface. That was like existential dread. Like the ship is like, it's going to happen. And it does. He makes it to the surface. I mean, albeit it's like a plane crashing more than him crashing into the surface. But he seems really hard to stop. So I think in that respect, give him credit where it's due,
Sure.
But I think his also like, I mean, at one point we think the character development of the villain is really lacking, but the I guess the power and the and the destruction capability of the villain, I thought is very fitting for a Guardians movie, because Guardians is just like in the face of just incredible odds, just like really unfavoring odds, somehow Guardians always figure out a way to come on top, which is I think a theme of throughout the Guardians movies. They always face against some really incredible or really powerful cosmic threat, and they somehow always manage to take them down in a
they come out on top by coming together. Sorry.
Exactly. In like a very creative manners as well. Like, like it reminds me of, like the Star-Lord versus Ego fight. It's like, you don't think like this guy who's literally in cosmic god will be taken down by his hot-blooded son, and like this guy who's literally a wielder of the Infinity Stone gets beaten in a dance-off, and by coming together as a team, Guardians managed to beat him. So I think it's the type of odds that fits Guardians movies, but it's just the villain as a character doesn't work. Like the way they set him up, like as this really powerful guy, that part totally worked, but we just did not believe in the villain's character at all. That's the problem.
it's your classic underdog story, basically. And I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of blockbusters work in that respect. You have the insurmountable like goal, like villain who's undefeatable. So I don't think that's unique to the franchise, the Guardians franchise in particular. But
Then
what
maybe
Aiden
it's
said is
just,
definitely true. Like, coming together.
Sorry, Alex. Just a little bit. One little point here. Maybe it's just the Guardians themselves then, because like, it's like you said, in a lot of movies we see this sort of incredible odds facing against our heroes. But maybe it's just the heroes are also incompetent. Maybe that's why it works so well in Guardians.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think that kind of speaks to one of our points. I'll just try and roughly segue here. But the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are about found family, and I think this movie does a great job of exploring that theme without like overutilizing like therapy terminology, which is, I was just listening to a podcast where they're talking about how I think like horror is like using that, but I think it's movies at large really in the past couple of years use therapy terminology as we've kind of like gotten more used to it as a culture, and like it's become more of a thing that people are okay with talking about, and I find it sometimes like so annoying.
I agree. And I think what's frustrating about it is that like it just kind of like reduces a lot of these things to like buzzwords, and it almost like is like putting a shield up where it's like, we're talking about this important thing, so you can't criticize us. But it's like you're not doing anything with that idea. Like you're not like, so like trauma, like say a character's talking about trauma. Well, if you just vaguely say like, well, this character has trauma, so they do that, that doesn't mean anything, and that's almost disrespectful to the concept of trauma, to write something very superficial about it. And I was just gonna say the movie Smile was kind of an example of that. I don't remember if they used the terms exactly, but like it's a very thinly veiled, like poorly conceived metaphor for mental health, and
it's
Are you saying that like they're using the word trauma so they can just sort of use that, like say, hey, we're talking about trauma, to instead explore exactly what the trauma is? Like, what?
Yes.
How is that? Okay.
I'm not saying this movie is an example of that. I'm saying that like that's just a trend in other things.
Gotcha.
It's the difference between saying we're talking about trauma versus actually talking about trauma, right? It's putting the words up front and saying that's enough, as opposed to actually creating a story that explores those themes, which is harder and oftentimes does not even use the words themselves, or is not even about that on the surface. So like this movie, I think does a great job. My point was, I think this movie does a great job of that, in that the story underneath is that these characters have suffered in their past. Rocket, he sees himself as a monster, and I've seen people create analogies with like childhood abuse. Like that's kind of like where Rocket is coming from. He was pulled apart and put back together again. Star-Lord lost his mom and like his only parental figure at a young age, and was raised by a like kind of abusive father. And they don't really reckon with Yondu in this movie so much as the next one. But Drax recently suffered the trauma of losing his created family, his wife and daughter. And Gamora also had an abusive parent, right? So all these characters are like have had most of them bad childhoods, except for Drax, and they have because of that they have like jaded views of the world. And now I'm going to refer to a quote I pulled from my own Letterboxd review. So I don't know if I mentioned this on the pod, but I was doing a rewatch that I have not finished, and I like really went into the reviews at that point. Like I was making like long reviews for the Marvel movies, and I was just reviewing it before this, and I was like, oh, what I said was kind of like insightful, like a little bit. I don't know. You can be the judge of that, but
we'll be the judge of that. Yeah.
I pulled a paragraph from my own review, so
sure.
Lots of hubris here, but I wrote, the Guardians have managed their loss and grief in various ways. Peter's always on the run, going from adventure to adventure, sleeping with different women, and looking out for lucrative opportunities. He keeps his trauma bottled, physically represented by the gift from his mom that he refuses to open. Drax turns his grief into rage. Rocket is sarcastic, mean, and violent, and Gamora refuses to let people get close to her. All of the Guardians, except Groot, push people away. Their experiences have taught them to look out only for themselves.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that this movie, like, to just put another thing on our discussion of, like, the therapy buzzword thing, it's like, it's shorthand for getting the audience to understand what you're talking about instead of, like, diving into it as well. And, like, that's the thing I do really love about this movie, is that, like I really love the present thing. Like, that's great. That's great that it's a present. It's great that, like, it's really nice. I mean, I just love the Jackson 5 song that plays too, and so, like, I love that they end the movie with that as well. But yeah, no, I agree with your paragraph there. I think
I was onto something when I wrote that. Yeah, I don't write good reviews anymore. I just write, like, one-liners. I've turned into you.
You do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, it's just because I'm lazy and I don't have time. Yeah. So it's hard to, like, actually analyze a movie, I think. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I like is that, like, that's kind of where they start, right? So their pasts have turned them into kind of, like, cynical people who are pretty well looking out only for themselves. And it's kind of like that road to becoming a family is difficult, and it takes certain steps to get there that I think the movie does really well. So, like, I like that there's, like, actual infighting, because people try to replicate the found family movie all the time, like it's a very classic type of movie, but I think sometimes what they don't get is, like, actual infighting. So there's the point getting towards the midpoint on Nowhere where these group of people are just, like, barely tolerating each other, and when they get drunk, they're, like, fighting, and, like, Rocket's about to kill Drax because he's really upset. And what else did I have? I like that they just kind of, like, this was okay. I'll read the other quote I had pulled from my review. Is the Guardians have to come to terms with their traumas and recognize that pushing people away is not the only means of self-preservation. So, like, they kind of have to realize that, and this is paraphrasing from what I remember reading from my own review, was that they have to, like, learn that self-sacrifice is kind of, like, a way of showing love and, like, reaching out to people. So, like, Peter does that for the first time in the midpoint when he saves Gamora. He's like, I felt something, like, that I wanted to save you because he cares for this person. And then later, I think one of the best scenes of this movie is Groot saves everybody with a hug.
Oh yeah,
right? Like he envelops them in himself and saves them.
Sorry to cut you, but one of my favorite shots of the movie is the one of Gamora looking out of Groot as the branches are intertwining and they close off That's a great shot.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll stop my lecture.
I do have a point on that as well, where I agree. I love the arcs. I think it's very well realized. There's a little character turn that I don't buy, though, in the movie, and I don't think we've seen. So when Rocket says, like, what do you mean we're gonna save them? And then Groot says, I'm Groot, and then he's like, I know they were our only friends, and it's like, when they were no they weren't, I just don't think anything has happened in the movie that Rocket would make that turn. It's not that I don't believe Rocket has it in him to make that turn. I just don't think anything has happened with these characters that specific, like, say if there was a scene where, like, Peter, like, stood up for Rocket, like the scene in the prison when Peter sees Rocket, like, the back and everything. Like, if there was some kind of interaction there where, like, Rocket understood that Peter, like, didn't see him as a monster or something, like, just something like that, because, like, or even something as simple change as him not saying that line, because that line bothers me, where he says, I know they're the only friends we have. Like, no, they're not. I think you can convince Rocket in a different way, where without him, I just don't believe Rocket would see them as friends
Yeah.
at that point.
I think it makes perfect sense, and I'm sure you don't disagree that Groot would think that. So it's
Yeah,
really just
I agree.
It's Rocket's reaction to the non-line "I am Groot." Like,
And I agree that-
what would he actually say?
And I agree that Drax would be like, I fucked, like he just got defeated, he just got slumped, and he realized this is all his fault. Like, I agree, I believe that.
Okay, I like how you almost said, "Oh man, like guys, I fucked up. I know I fucked up." Like that's what you were about to say for Drax, which is just like a very modern thing. But no, for Rocket though, I don't know. I think yeah, it's really like, what do you call a friend, you know?
Sure.
And so I think maybe for Rocket, just the fact that like they've spent a lot of time together at this point.
But
like,
they
that's
haven't
my
spent
own-
that.
I
like,
know, but like
It's been
they're-
like a day or less.
True, but think of, like, this is like Han Solo and Chewbacca, right? That's the analog, or like the same.
Yeah.
They're the same character. They don't spend time with other people, and then suddenly they're spending time with people. They're escaping prisons together. So I do agree with you, but that's my like kind of like half-assed. This is why.
Sure.
But I see what you mean for sure.
And I don't think it's a big deal, and I also think it's something that could be tweaked really simply. It's a little thing that bothers me every time I see this movie.
Fair enough. What else shall we talk about?
Well, while we're talking about things that don't work, I have another nitpicky thing,
Sure,
which is
sure.
that for me, the comedy in the beginning, they have a constant joke of Peter references thing from Earth, and it's just like, most of the time I was like, come on, dude. Like, I think this is a personal taste thing, but particularly when he's getting the orb right at the beginning, and he says like, get this ninja turtle to stop talking to me or stop touching me. It's like,
Yes.
I could do it though. I don't like that kind of line. There's also another line where he says like, he's referencing the fact that the orb is a MacGuffin, and like that's what the joke is, and so he says, yeah, it's like the Maltese Falcon, and it's
Ark
like
of the Covenant. Yeah.
yeah, but I was like, he was like 8 when he got abducted. He does not know about the Maltese Falcon. Like, what are you talking about?
My what's the word? Like, I'm standing up for it. I can't remember what the word for that is. My justification, I guess, is that I think it's kind of like a funny thing to me that his reference points are limited to a very specific time span. So the Maltese Falcon is an example
That
where
one's outside of
that would technically fall out of, but there's a chance where it has been in the public like lingo. So like I could be like, well, it's a famous MacGuffin. He's a bit young to know that, so
Yeah.
you kind of have a point. But you know, at the point he was abducted, it had been around for 40 years. So there's a chance he
But did you know? Like, would you have referenced the Maltese Falcon when you were?
No, of course not. No. But I do like all the stuff about Kevin Bacon. I think is funny, you know. And
I
how
agree, that's funny. Yeah.
Like that's what he views are his heroes, right? And they do this in the next movie too. But like, I kind of like sometimes pop culture things annoy me, but this works for me for some reason.
I think for me, it's just too much right in the beginning. There's a lot of jokes like this right in the beginning, and I think like, to me, I guess my problem is it's too on the nose of like, get it, he's from like the 90s, and so like these are the things he'd reference. Like, there's just too much of it. Whereas like if it was just the Kevin Bacon thing, and then he references like Indiana Jones, if he references that too, and then like maybe a couple others, it's like okay. But there's a lot of it in the very beginning of the movie.
There's a lot, yeah. Also,
And then
I
it's
think
not in the rest of it, which I was
Yeah.
like, in the beginning of the movie, I was like, do I have to put up with this joke for the rest of the movie? And then I was like, oh, no, I don't. Okay.
I think also what you're talking about is like it's a lot of name calling, which is the problem we have with the Avatar James Cameron voice.
Yeah.
But like
yeah.
it's not the same. Those two
It's
are
not the
different.
same.
Those are very different beasts. like we're not getting numb nuts. Which is my favorite James Cameronism.
It is the same category of don't touch me, you dickhead, dickwad butt.
Well,
It's the same
that's what they
category.
transition to. They go
Yeah.
from a lot of like Ninja Turtle. There's so many other ones that I agree with. Oh, it's like shut up, Giving Tree. Like that's what he calls
Yeah.
Groot.
Oh, I didn't like that one either. I was like,
I find that funny. That's one. That one works for me. But it does more transition just into the immature kind of like D-hole, not D-hole.
Yeah.
They never say D-hole. A-hole, dick. Like it's quite an immature movie, but like it does kind of work for me. Immature humor is
I
funny.
think it's a taste thing. I just don't
Yeah.
like that style of writing where characters always be like, hop off, turd brain. Like,
Turd
I
brain?
just don't like that. Yeah.
I like this made up one though. Yeah. Anyways, I think the rest of it, like other than that, maybe like I think the humor is very different from what the MCU was before and
Yeah.
has continued to be afterwards. I know a lot of people say they're just trying to recapture the voice of what's his name, Joss Whedon, right from
I
the
don't think
Avengers
so.
movie.
Yeah.
Well, like
This
it's
movie
the
isn't
quippy.
doing that at all.
No. That's
Yeah.
what I mean. Is that why
Oh,
this one
okay,
works
yeah.
so well? Is that it's not doing Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
It's doing James Gunn.
Right,
which
and
I-
it's character motivated comedy, which is in the
Yes.
Joss Whedon style. Every character is like
Sound-
quippy
they
guy
sound
who
the
has to
same.
quip. Whereas
Yeah.
like these characters, it's like Gamora would only say certain jokes, like when she's like, "We're just like Kevin Bacon," like
Oh my god,
Like,
her delivery of the line is
Yeah.
so funny to me too. Like this is not sequitur, but she says it with an accent. I don't know if you noticed, but she says, "We're just like Kevin Bacon," and I hear the accent every time. I don't know if it's actually there, but it makes me laugh so much.
but yeah, and like so like Rocket wouldn't make the same jokes as Drax,
Yeah.
and like yeah. One thing I was surprised about with the comedy is specifically regarding Drax. I was like, okay, I've seen the Drax doesn't understand things joke a million times. Like, am I still gonna think this is funny? And lo and behold, the very first time when he's like, nothing would go over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I catch it. I laughed out loud again, and it's like. It's a funny joke. It's a funny joke and it's great delivery of the joke too.
It's the writing. Dave Bautista nails it.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it really is the timing because it's the pause between those two ideas. It's nothing would go over my head. My reflexes are too quick. like he's like self-musing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things like people have tried to parody it, most notably with that Dungeons and Dragons guy. I don't know his name. Reggae. I was trying to think of more examples, and the only one that I came up with was Black Adam probably does a bit of that, where he's like, I don't get your modern references, but I don't know if that's the same. Anyways.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, no, I think the comedy's great in this movie. What else shall we talk about? I'm just looking at my list.
Well, you do have a point about score here, and that was another thing I noticed where like I could not name very many MCU scores for you that like have like a fairly recognizable like theme, but there aren't that many where it's like I can picture like it's weirdly enough like some of the score from The Winter Soldier I can vividly
That's what I was
remember.
thinking of.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
just because it's the most different, like
It's the distorted screaming. Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
never gonna forget that.
Yeah. And then like I remember like the Avengers theme, and like that's pretty much it. But like this movie has like memorable score that like actually feels like not just generic action score.
It's
Like
it's
try
really
to
well
fuck. I'm dying. Try to hum a melody from Ant-Man. Like
Oh, I know Ant-Man.
Oh, you do?
Like
I still don't know.
that like the whole time,
Oh.
like that beat.
Yeah.
Also, there's something with bongos, but no, that's why I'm not a score guy. I usually don't notice scores, but this movie like I think is scored so well. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy theme is such an iconic theme. Like it's usually not like regarded the same as the Avengers theme, for example, but I think maybe it's even better than the Avengers theme. Like maybe
No, that's
and
cap.
I actually do love the Avengers theme though. I think it's a
Yeah,
good
the
score.
Avengers
the Avengers
theme
theme
is
works
too
very well.
iconic.
There's a reason why they keep bringing it back. It
Yeah.
works. But I think also like the scoring of like the Groot scene with the lights, like either one in the third act when he's producing the lights or the cocoon thing, like the score sells so much of that. We're not even talking about the soundtrack, even.
Yeah.
Speaking of soundtrack, though, this movie had a very famous soundtrack. What a cultural revolution!
Oh yeah,
when
that was
when
huge.
the Awesome Mix came out, like 70s. I think all the music was from the 70s for this movie, right? So it was just like
Maybe, yeah.
70s nostalgia. Like that did so much to change my music taste. Like I have
Oh, really?
I have a playlist now called Easy Listening 70s Soft Rock. Go check it out on Spotify. It's got like like 21 listeners or like people who've liked the playlist. Just throwing that out
Nice.
there. But I don't think I would have gotten there without this soundtrack. It was sort of part of my childhood with like Queen and stuff, but this kind of like made it cool, you know? It was a big moment, 2014.
No, this was a huge deal. I remember like people were like, yeah, like I was in middle school and like people were starting
We
to
were
listen to
in
these songs
middle
all the
school.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
like middle schoolers were going around listening to like 70s hits, which is that's pretty nuts.
It takes a lot to do that. Peter, do you
Yeah.
remember middle school?
I just think like there's a reason why they started using a lot of the 80s and 70s soundtrack, and it's like one of the biggest reasons because of this movie. Like if we look at the Mario movie, for example, like it's
God.
targeted towards the kids, and they were able to hum along to Mr. Blue Sky when it played in the theater. So I think, like it owned, a lot of these references to the Guardians trilogy.
I do think Mario is referencing like more like Shrek.
It's very Shrek.
It's very Shrek. Like
Yeah.
I agree, the Mr. Blue Sky thing in particular though feels like. Whereas when we do Guardians 2, we'll get into a scene with Mr. Blue Sky. Yeah. But yeah, I felt like Mario was more like the Shrek thing, and that's what I meant when during that review when I was like, this is stuff from when I was a small child. Like this is the same gag. Like yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe the difference is 80s is kind of more referenced because that was kind of like the hit of like pop songs that were super super popular, whereas 70s was kind of like maybe not to the same like top charts level, if that makes sense.
It's also the joke. The joke is that like you're referencing the fact that the song was used as a pop cultural moment. Like so like it's like
there were
Shrek does this all the time where
moments.
like in Shrek they do like this isn't a song, but they do like the Matrix kick in Shrek. And that's what Shrek is like. That's like the joke of Shrek all the time. So like it's like if you brought in like Eye of the Tiger. Like the joke of that is it's from like Rocky. And that's the right song, right? It's Eye of the Tigers and Rocky.
It's actually
But,
from
like-
the third movie though.
Oh really?
It's not from the first movie, which is weird for people who did not grow up with Rocky, i.e. the three of us.
Yeah. But my point is that like when like Mario and Shrek do that, they're actually referencing the fact that it's in movies so much. Like that's what I feel. Whereas in this movie it's just like this is the music he listens to, and so this is what the soundtrack
And they're
is.
like good songs. They're like very carefully curated. They're not on the nose songs. They're just like songs. I think actually what I remember is James Gunn was like trying to pick the songs carefully, and he said pick songs that if people heard in the grocery store, they would be like, "Oh, I remember this song," but they don't know the name of it. Like that was the goal, and I think he nails that like perfectly, with the exception of maybe the Jackson 5. Like that's super iconic, but I think the other ones like they became big because of this movie, where they had kind of become like forgotten over time, maybe, you know. But yeah, this movie was a very big moment. I remember in middle school dressing up as Star-Lord for Halloween one time. I did that. Yeah, I tried to get like a bunch of people to be the Guardians with me. It kind of worked. We kind of got a couple people to do that.
Got like halfway there.
Hold on. Which grade was this?
Clearly before you were there. So
Okay. I was like, I don't remember this.
This could have been grade
six?
7. No.
Okay,
It's grade
that's
6.
why.
Because grade 6 would have been before the movie was released. It was released in 2014, so that would have been grade 7 at the earliest, and it released in August, so it would have been really in the cultural whatever for Halloween time.
Sure.
Just saying.
Yep.
Actually, I remember
Alex.
I can vividly remember seeing trailers for this on the TV, and my parents being like, "Hey, do you want to go see the movie with like this talking raccoon and like tree guy? Like, oh, that looks really fun. Like, let's go see that."
I distinctly remember like my family, we were all like, I don't know, like, okay, like I don't know who the hell are the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Like like I don't know, like why would we care about that? And I distinctly remember that I saw it for the first time in Thunder Bay visiting extended family. And like we all walked to the theater like, "Oh wow, that was a good one." Oh, like pleasant, like very very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, no, I think that was most people. It was like the initial reaction is always, "What the heck is this? Who are these guys? Never heard of them." And the comics people being like, "Even I don't know, guys. Like, I can't even help you this time," you know? And that was
Yeah.
kind of like Marvel's strong suit at the beginning, was choosing the ones that nobody had heard of.
Because that was
Making-
Iron Man too at first, right? Like no one
Yeah.
gave a fuck about Iron Man before they made a movie.
People say that he was a D-list character, which for people who did not grow up with comics or who kind of grew up on the movies, it's always a shock to be like, "Wait, what? Like, are you kidding me?" But no, it was like
Yeah.
Hulk, Spider-Man, the X-Men. Those were the big guys. Captain
Yeah.
America was a
The ones they
has-been
first
from,
tried
like-
to make movies for. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, anyways, this was a big moment. But this was also peak MCU era. So some things that I jotted down was like, this was kind of like, remember when we had theories about Marvel
Yeah.
movies? I don't know how much you were into the Marvel movies, Aiden, but I know Peter and I were pretty
I was
big on
I was very into them.
Okay,
I was
yeah, so
super
we're all the
excited.
same.
Like up until it wasn't until like after Infinity War came out where it really started to peter out. No pun intended,
Yeah.
Peter. But it was like Infinity War. I was like unbelievably excited for. I used to know exactly when each movie was coming out.
Yep.
And it wasn't until like after that where I was like, what's going on here? And even Endgame, I was really excited for. But yeah.
Yeah. Peter, how was peak MCU era for you at this time, 2014?
I honestly don't remember. What's like the movie right after this one?
Age of Ultron.
Age of Ultron. Oh, okay, I do remember seeing that. What's after Age of Ultron?
Ant-Man.
Yeah,
I did just check, so I do
Okay.
know the next like two, but after that I'm gonna forget. There was a time when I knew.
Is it
the
really
order.
peak though? Like I think the Winter Soldier era was like peak for me. I really like Winter Soldier.
It's like the same era.
Well, guess what came out right before Guardians? That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, that
For
makes
me,
sense.
2014 was the best year Marvel was probably ever. Like consistently, like
Yeah.
two of their best movies were 2014.
I agree.
And I don't think they've reached that high.
Even though
since.
I think the Winter Soldier doesn't hold up anywhere near as well as Guardians does.
No, it doesn't.
Really?
If you
I agree.
rewatch it, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, if you
Okay,
rewatch Winter
actually, I
Soldier,
haven't
it's
seen
like
it recently.
man, because to the drive of Winter Soldier is like I remember when I first saw it and the scene on the boat and he kicks the guy off the boat. I went like, oh, like oh shit, we're getting like he's gonna be like a strong like action guy. We're gonna get like cool action in this movie, and like that was a big draw of it when I first saw it as a kid.
Yeah.
But if you rewatch it
Um,
now, it's like
But when it
It's a
comes
little
to
weak
peak
under the
MCU
hood.
though,
yeah.
peak MCU, I'd say Doctor Strange was really close to Infinity War, right? Doctor Strange.
Those were 2 years.
Doctor
apart.
Strange is like 2016
Or
or
a little
something.
less.
Really?
Yeah. It was 2016
Also,
and then Infinity War.
Doctor
was
Strange
2018.
also being a mid to bad movie.
I was gonna say like that's
I
not really a
really
good
like
movie
Doctor Strange,
to
to be
prove
honest.
your case. I would say okay. Here's what I would say. I think if we're looking at it by phase, I think Phase 3 is probably the strongest on average. You've got Civil War, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Guardians 2, the two
Sure.
Avengers films, Black Panther. That's and
Yo,
people
dude, Thor
who
Ragnarok?
people who like Thor Ragnarok, not
Right.
for me.
But when I first saw Thor Ragnarok, I loved it. When I first saw it, yeah.
No, I love Thor as well, but this might be a hot take. I did not like Civil War. I thought Civil War was a bad movie.
I really
think
like Civil War. And I
think
still
Civil
actually like
War's-
Civil War decent.
I think Civil War is quite good. I don't think it's not without flaws, but Where did I rank that one actually? I'm
Civil War was
curious.
also the first time they did anything to that like scale. Like I don't think you guys.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember how big of a deal the airport scene was? Like
Yeah,
when
yeah, it's like
that
Avengers
first happened. It was like
2.5.
holy shit.
That's what everyone's
Yeah.
saying. Avengers 2.5.
Okay, so Civil War I have as my number 7 on MCU ranked. So like,
Yeah.
it's
Too high.
well, okay, whatever. You can argue, but like, I think like I said, like I was saying, on average, Phase 3 is a stronger phase. The only bad ones
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
are Doctor Strange, which was mid to bad, and Captain
Yeah.
Marvel, which was mid to bad. I think those are the only ones that I don't.
I like
really
Captain Marvel
Doctor
more than
Strange.
Doctor Strange though.
I think Doctor
Like-
Strange visually did so many
Oh.
incredible things.
And I
really
forgot-
like Doctor Strange.
I strongly disagree. It's doing
I-
budget Inception. It's doing
I
Inception light.
I like
Exactly,
Doctor.
and it's better than half the shit Marvel puts out.
I like
At least
Doctor
it's-
Strange. I like Doctor Strange the character. I think the movie wasted the potential of that character.
I don't even agree with that. I don't
Okay.
know the comics, but
I don't either. So
Yeah.
I did forget though. Some other Phase 3 films are Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I think is bad. I think it's really bad. And there was one other one that I forgot. I'm trying to find it.
is Spider-Man Far From Home? No,
Yes.
that's after Infinity War.
Yes.
Oh, it is. Oh yeah.
There were two Spider-Mans in the same phase, and that one
I like
I
that
need to revisit. I think I had a good time, but I don't know if it's great.
Some of my favorite MCU scenes are actually in that movie. The Mysterio
Interesting.
CG sequences, I love those. Those are so fun.
Interesting. But
Yeah.
like
I thought it's a huge downgrade compared to Homecoming. Like Homecoming was significantly
Homecoming is so
better.
good.
Yeah.
Homecoming is probably.
I agree,
too,
it's not as good as Homecoming, but
Yeah, Homecoming is probably too high on my list, but right now it's at 3. It's under the
I
Guardians.
I have a very big
think-
soft spot for all the Spider-Man MCU movies. Like
Really?
like I have big blinders on for those movies. I like the cast and I like the characters, and I think those movies are fun. And I
But
But I
just like
genuinely
Spider-Man
think,
too much.
like for Homecoming at least, like the villain and how everything fit together.
Oh,
at least,
yeah.
like first time watching it, it
Yeah.
was just like, oh my god.
Oh, there's actually
That
a really
works,
like creative.
but, like, you know,
The reveal is actually a very creative
right? It's so
sequence.
These guys,
smart. Yeah.
we're getting into a different
Yeah.
movie.
yeah.
We're getting
Yeah.
really sidetracked.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, this was getting up to that zone, right? Like
Right.
so phase 2, this was the heart of phase 2. And while phase 2 is not the strongest phase, it's got some pretty bad films in there. Thor the Dark World, one of the worst. Age of Ultron wasn't very good. Which is bad when your Avengers movie is bad.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3 is hit or miss depending on the person.
I
you
kind
know,
of like
so-
Iron Man 3. Yeah.
But I think as like a culture, it was a really big point for. It was before it was like as mainstream as Infinity War was, where like all the mainstream news outlets were like, oh, what's gonna happen? What does this mean? Right? Like it wasn't
Yeah.
quite there yet, I think.
Right.
And there was still that element of like, this is a niche thing. I'm a nerd
Yeah.
about it, and the
Like,
fandom
I don't
of
think-
it all.
I don't think it was very niche. I think everyone went
Maybe
out
not,
and
yeah.
saw these. Everyone went out and saw these movies at this point. But I do think that like no one gave a fuck about like Thanos at this point. Like no one like
Yeah.
no one was like, oh, that's okay. So it's in the Infinity Stone, and they're gonna like
That
people were just
guy.
like, oh, okay, yeah. But I distinctly remember like everyone was going to see these movies like
Yeah.
when they were coming out.
I have a question
I mean,
for you
hey,
guys.
it's $700 million.
That's true. We were some of those dollars. I have a question for you guys. What was the first MCU film that you saw in theaters?
It would have been Iron Man or whichever one comes first, Iron Man or Hulk. I've seen I think almost all of them in theaters.
Really?
Ooh,
That's
that is-
interesting. Okay, Peter.
That is tough. I have to look up a list first.
Okay, I do
It
know
might
which
be
one it
Winter.
is.
It might be Winter Soldier for me.
Really?
I think I'm gonna give the same answer. Actually, let me just check.
Really? What?
Sort by.
That's
I know.
actually crazy to me.
I
No,
know,
I was seeing it from the beginning.
No, because that's the thing. I didn't. I remember that my family had Iron Man, like we owned it, and so that's
Yeah.
how I watched that for the first time. That is not the. Oh, I see what it did. Release date.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I just
actually
I
Winter
distinctly
Soldier.
remember. I
It's
distinctly remember seeing
either-
Iron Man with my family.
It's either Winter Soldier or Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 released really
Oh,
early
yeah.
on.
Iron Man 3 was 2013 or
2013.
yeah, 2013.
They pumped out 3 Iron Man films
They
in
did.
like 5 years. Yeah.
It was their lead guy,
Crazy.
so they did 2 really quickly. But no, for me it was Winter Soldier. I remember. It was.
That's crazy.
I think it was like a birthday related thing. I don't know. Like it wasn't my birthday, but I just remember that like downloading on iTunes Thor: The Dark World to catch up. I was like, oh, I gotta catch up because I had no, because it was like I had seen. I remember I saw Avengers for the first time at a sleepover or something, and everyone else had fallen asleep, and I was like captivated, and I was like, "What is this? What is this magnificent thing?"
That's
So this would have been.
crazy.
I know, right? So this would have
Everyone,
been like,
everyone
2013
around
or
me in my life was like seeing these movies like from the
No,
get go,
not for
from
me.
like the very
Yeah.
like Avengers itself was like a hype thing. I remember everyone in school talked about Avengers, and that's crazy. You guys are insane.
No, I
Dude,
remember.
I remember seeing Avengers right after it released, not in theaters. And how old would I be at the time? When did it release?
10,
2013?
right?
2012. 12, no,
I think it's
2012.
2010.
No, it's
2012.
not.
So I was like 10 years
2012.
old, and I was like, "Yo, this movie is so boring that I skipped to Act 3. That I loved Act 3, but I just couldn't sit myself down and watch how they assemble the team together in Act 1. I just
I've-
remember that being so boring.
I've heard that criticism of the movie a lot, and I've rewatched it since, and I disagree with it. I actually think that movie
Dude,
is
it might
still
just
pretty
be,
sick.
you know, like 10-year-old. You can't,
Yeah.
like short
Sure.
attention span type thing.
Anyways, we're getting into another different movie. We
Yeah.
should do this for every movie, it seems, in the Marvel Universe, because we have takes. But I think we need to get to our question, Aiden. We have a question
we
that
sure
we
do.
tend to ask.
So the podcast is called Predator versus Movies, in case you haven't noticed, and we've done the movie part, so now we have to get into the Predator. We ask the question: would this movie be better? Be better?
Calling it best moment of the year. Predator versus movies moment of the year right here.
Dude, this is
Would
the
the
podcast
movie-
2.0. It's Better versus
Would
Movies.
the movie be better? Oh my god.
That's like the kind of joke that a certain prof of yours that I wasn't in the class of.
Yeah. Yeah, too bad Peter's not here to witness this.
Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, we have a segment. We ask the question: would the movie be better if the Predator from the movie Predator was in it? And I think no, this movie would not be better if Predator
No,
was
this
in it.
movie's
Although,
great.
if he was like in the collector's thing, he could
Oh
be there.
yeah. This is an easy one. You're right.
Yeah.
He would fit in there really nicely. I'm glad we didn't get into the Easter eggs of it all, because this movie's like packed to the brim with Easter
Yeah.
eggs, and I'm at the point where like I don't care.
I don't care. Yeah, I
I'm
don't care at all.
so over it, over Easter eggs now. I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, sure, whatever. But that used to be a big thing, being
Yeah.
like, oh, who's the case? Who's that?
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like a shadow. That shadow looks kind of like Glup Shadow, but like I don't know.
Yeah,
You know.
it is crazy. Marvel has been able to kind of avoid like Glup Shadow allegations, which is, that's something.
It's impressive. I don't know how they did that.
Yeah.
Anyways, next week for the listeners, we're going to probably do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, as we will still be taking a little break-see, but this will be in anticipation of us reviewing Guardians 3. So if you like us, check us out on Instagram at Predator v Movies. We're also on Twitter with the same handle. People have been following us. We have quite a few followers on Instagram, I've noticed.
Nice.
Yeah, I think more than our Twitter, which is sad because that's the one.
That's
I like.
normal. That's normal.
Oh, okay. You're that is a good point actually.
You
If
generally
you
have
like-
more Instagram followers than Twitter, yeah.
Okay, follow us on Twitter though.
Yeah, follow
Do
us
it,
on
guys.
Twitter.
If you like my thoughts on movies, check me out at _AlexGordon_. I leave reviews sometimes.
You can also look at my letterbox, which is 810sunny. That's 810 SONNY. My name is Wombo. I also leave reviews sometimes.
Peter, do you want to plug anything today?
Yo, guys, I want to plug my MySpace account. It's no, I'm kidding. I don't have anything to plug. What is MySpace?
Uh-oh. Well, you know what that means.
kidding,
Peter
I'm
had nothing to plug, which means that you guys are all contractually obligated to leave a review on whatever streaming platform you listen to us on.
That's right. Leave a star review. Better be 5. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You know how it is.
Share it to your
anyways.
friends. Put it on your Snapchat story. Venmo request it.
Tell your friend. If you still talk to people, tell your friends. Let them know verbally with your mouth.
True.
Move your teeth and tongue and lips and form words with your larynx or whatever is in there, and tell them
Whatever
to listen
is
to this
in there.
podcast. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not. That's not something I know. So do
Just simple
that.
film guys. Yeah.
What's this? I don't know. It's.
I don't know science. I just know point and shoot.
Okay, whatever. We need to wrap this up. Anyways, until next time. This has gone off the rails. Until next time, I'm Alex.
I'm Peter.
I made it.
And this was Predator versus movies. I forgot the name of our own thing. Pew, pew, pew,
Predator versus
pew.
movies. Pew, 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 pew.